I am going to be doing an analysis of Debussy's La Puerta del Vino. This is Prelude number 3 from book 2. And I want to start off by first listening to the prelude. So I'm going to share my screen and I will share sound. I'm going to start off by just a quote by Debussy. I believe more and more that music in its essence is not a thing that can be poured into a rigorous and traditional mold. It is made of colors and rhythmical beats. Music is a mysterious mathematical process whose elements partake in infinity, capturing mysterious relations between nature and the imagination. So my presentation is going to be, like I said, analyzing Debussy's Prelude number 3 from book 2. So I'm going to present some historical context for Debussy, who lived from 1862 to 1918, the event that inspired him to write this prelude, La Puerta del Vino, and also provide some historical context concerning the famous archway this prelude is named after. For the analysis portion of this presentation, I will examine the overall mood and the character of the piece and how Debussy brings to life the drunken rowdiness of the party life in the piazza at the Alhambra. And I'm going to give an in-depth analysis and examine his music through the lens of various melodic and rhythmic motives that are developed throughout the piece, as well as timbres, scales, structure, harmony, counterpoint, tonality, timbre, modality, texture. I said texture twice, I think. And sonorities used. And then also coming from a performance standpoint, how, if we analyze the music, we can better perform it. So I have some suggestions for pianists who want to learn the piece as well. So just a little background on Debussy. He was a very important composer who helped bridge the late Romanticism into the early modernism. And he was not really known for being a melodist or a contrapuntalist composer, although a lot of his work does contain counterpoint. He was known more as a colorist. And the colorist term connects to the Impressionist style that he was labeled but rejected because he saw his work as being more than just derivative of these Impressionists. And Debussy was, of course, highly influenced by the deep emotional romanticism of Wagner, even though Wagner's music contrasted highly with the atmosphere and coloristic quality of Impressionism. And in 1887, Debussy even stated that Tristan and Isolde was the most beautiful thing I know from the point of view of the profundity of the emotion. Okay, so a little bit about Impressionism and its historical significance. So Impressionism was a 19th century art movement born out of the world of French visual arts. As a movement, Impressionism was characterized by, loosened brushwork and lightened palettes, pure and intense colors. And also there's this kind of like unfinished amateurish quality to a lot of the artwork. And so the goal of the Impressionists was to capture the impression of a scene with this animated brushwork, and they often worked outdoors, painting landscapes. Oscar Thompson in literature, he said, in literature, painting, and music, the goal of these Impressionist artists was to suggest rather than depict, to mirror not the object, but the emotional reaction to the object, to interpret a passing impression rather than to seize upon the fixed nature of permanent reality. So Debussy adopted and synthesized his own techniques and aesthetics and drew upon many of these varied sources of inspiration, all while putting his own stamp on them. And unlike the Impressionists, he connected the gap between the field of the eye and the mysterious center of thought, according to Paul Gauguin, which allowed him to create a realistic yet dreamlike imitation of human feelings. And Debussy's works engage with metaphysical concepts such as the ontology of music, the mystery of temporality, and the nature of perception. So how did Debussy, what was the factor that happened that inspired him to write this prelude? So he actually started working on this prelude number 3 after receiving a postcard from Spanish composer Manuel de Falla, which featured a picture of La Puerta del Vino, which translates to the wine gate. And it was a regal gateway of the Moorish Alhambra Palace in Granada, Spain. And it's not so much about the archway or at the door of the Alhambra, but it's the turbulent life of the piazza, where there was a lot of, singing, song, drunken parties, the rhythm of the habanera. So Debussy basically captured the essence of life in the piazza, the party, even though he actually never traveled to Spain. So let's now look at the historical and sociological context of Granada, Spain. Most people are familiar with Christopher Columbus and the colonization of the Americas in 1492, but also during this year, it was important in history for Spain and Europe. The Christian Reconquista of the Iberian Peninsula from Muslim rulers was resolved from the fall of the Alhambra and Granada. And then Granada's conquest in 1492 was a huge revolutionary moment. Catholic monarchs Ferdinand and Isabel's capture of the Alhambra complex also stands as one of the main symbols of the Reconquista. And then why is the Alhambra so important? So it's the best preserved monument of the period of Muslim control of the Iberian Peninsula. And Alhambra in Arabic means the red one. and it's in the Sabika Hill of Granada. And red, which is Hamra in Arabic, signifies the distinct color of the walls of the Alhambra. And the original Alhambra complex was built in the 9th century and then rebuilt by the Moors in the 11th century. And then after the Moors were defeated, the Alhambra was transformed under subsequent monarchs and therefore possesses both Muslim and Christian architecture. There's a lot of detail throughout the Alhambra that's very extraordinary and delicate. And it kind of is the iconic emblem of Nasrid dynastic influence in Granada and Islamic Spain. And it also is an architectural masterpiece that kind of has this multiculturalism of 3 different cultures coexisting side by side. So these include Spanish, Moorish / Arabic, and Jewish cultures. And Nasrid court poets portrayed the Alhambra as a pearl set in emeralds, and it became the ultimate icon of Christian victory in the reconquest of Spain from Muslim rulers in 1492. And it's still a symbol of Spanish Moorish architecture, and it cannot be divorced from the mixing of this flowering of multiculturalism from around the world. Okay, so let's talk about this prelude. So the beginning of the prelude states, with sudden oppositions of extreme violence and passionate sweetness. And this is not a very French description, right? This is kind of more Spanish Moorish description. And basically, this is a description really kind of typifies the central quality that a lot of Andalusian music often express, which is the mixture of both like conflicting drama and passion, kind of the sweetness, and then this also fiery passion. So there's a lot of this kind of push-pull going on in this prelude. And stylistic components that Debussy used to create this dramatic and sensual Spanish mood is that he used this habanero bass ostinato that starts right here. And this is, I kind of consider these 4 bars as the introduction. And then you have this dotted 8th note, 16th note, and then 2 8th notes. And this is the figure that pretty much permeates the entire prelude from beginning to end. There are points where it does drop out, but it's basically kind of holding the piece in this D flat major tonality and kind of keeps it moving forward. And it also kind of, along with, because there's kind of 3 contrapuntal or 3 independent levels that are happening overall. So you got this habanero rhythm, which is like held throughout this bass ostinato. And then you have these beautiful, sultry, sensual melodies, and they develop into these triplet, doublet kind of figures. And there's way more ornamentation, and we'll talk about the scales they use. And then there's a lot of middle voiced pedal points. So these are these kind of middle voices that don't really move too often. They're kind of just holding a harmony, holding something that's kind of, along with the ostinato and the bass, it kind of keeps a static stabilization of the key for the melody to kind of do all its fancy virtuosic ornamentation above. So I think in this piece it's quite obvious that he is imitating the Spanish guitar, the Spanish guitar, which is associated with flair and passion. You get that through the seductive central melody, and then a lot of the scales. So like here we have this B to E to D to E, and I wrote out the whole scale. So it's B, C, D, E, F, A flat, B. You do have an E flat in here, but it's more of a chromatic passing tone. And this is basically a double Phrygian hexatonic scale. So it's a 6-tone scale, and I wrote out the different semitones between each of the notes, but it has a very kind of Arabic quality to it. So it's definitely fits in with the identity of this prelude. And there is an octatonic scale that is used as well, and we'll look at it later. In the very beginning, you have these perfect fifths, and with a guitar, the lowest string is an E, and so there could be the slack key tuning where you detune the guitar so that you can get those lowered fifths. And, you know, on a guitar, these would be, I don't play guitar, but I feel like it would be very easy to kind of slide up and down the guitar neck to play these perfect fifths. Yeah, so it's a very volatile, you know, very fiery introduction. And then we have this ostinato, which now is at pianissimo. And then we have this very kind of sleepy, sensual, seductive melody. And again, it's kind of developing into this triplet, doublet kind of feel. And this could easily be played with a guitar. It could be a voice, especially when you get into these flourishes. I kind of think about like some of the guitar technique that must be happening. Like it could be like a hammer on or a hammer off. But it's just a lot of guitar. It's like he's trying to make the piano sound like a guitar here. So yeah, let's talk about the arrangement. So I said like guitars, it could be for voice, like this could be a singer, kind of like Middle Eastern singing that's maybe on a vowel or something, or more, you know, kind of think of like, you know, just very, very chromatic and just lots of flair, lots of virtuosity. So yeah, even though it is, you know, written for a piano, could easily be arranged for guitar and singers. Okay, so let's talk about this habanera rhythm. And I dug up some research about the habanera because it's permeates the entire prelude, and it's just this cohesive backdrop that just provides the groundwork for all the, you know, the passion and the excitement to kind of emerge suddenly. So it's important to note that at the beginning of the piece, it states movement de habanera, which translates to in the motion of the habanera, which is not to be confused with the tempo of a habanera, because all dances are supposedly characterized more commonly by their rhythm instead of their tempo. So there are various types of habanera, but the most common ones are the ones in simple duple time. So it's in 2/4 time, where the stress falls on a dotted eighth note, 16th note, and then 2 eighth notes. And as you can see, this is kind of, you know, the introduction, and then it kind of goes into the habanera rhythm. And it outlines a perfect fifth, giving stabilization to the key of D flat major. Yeah, so, you know, the habanera historically was a dance that originated in Cuba and made its way into the European culture via Spain, and became quite popular in French and English salons by the latter decades of the 19th century. And there's actually, you know, music, if you look at the very cells of the habanera, it's based on an African motif, the trasilo, and its variants. And so yeah, the dance was very widespread. The trasilo and its variants are found in popular music in virtually every city on the planet. And the trasilo variant, which was known as the habanera rhythm, was implemented into European art music and is based on the famous rhythmic pattern 8th, 16th rest, 16th note, 8th note, 8th note, which is the same pattern that we have in this prelude. Okay, so we talked a little bit about rhythm. We're going to talk about the melodies and the scales. So we kind of talked about the sultry kind of seductive melody that enters right here at bar 5. And it's almost like it's contradicting against the bass, which is D flat major, and this scale, which has a D natural in it. So there is a sense of like these 3 elements. You got this ostinato bass, you got this sultry seductive melody, and then you got these middle voice pedal points, and they're kind of operating like 3 independent things, 3 independent elements, but they all kind of you know, they all kind of work, and it creates some sort of dissonance and maybe some drama and a little bit of exoticism, I guess. I don't know how else to describe it. It gives it like a Spanish, Moorish, Jewish kind of sound, like the mixture that we talked about earlier. So yeah, this double phrygian hexatonic, and that's just the scale that I looked up on the internet that had these notes in it. So if we scroll down through the piece, there's a very special moment that happens right here at measure 17. And this is kind of where the where the melody is descending. And at first I thought it was a chromatic kind of descent, but it's actually this octatonic scale. So starting with the C sharp, so everything's a half step, then whole step, then half step, then whole step, half step, whole step, and half step. So it's kind of descending down to this D flat, where the melody kind of vanishes to nothing. And then you see here, like I kind of marked those triplet doublet figures from the habanera 1 motive. At measure 21, you have these what I think are guitar chords, just like strummed guitar chords. And so when I kind of analyzed it, it was like the top part was kind of this pentatonic scale, and the bottom part was in a minor, or sorry, the right hand was in a whole step, kind of a whole tone type of scale, and the left hand was playing like a minor pentatonic scale. And so here at measure 25, you have these rolled chords, and notice that the habanero is the downbeats left out. And then you have this kind of echo of that, of the habanero 1 motive, that kind of emerges out of these guitar strums. So, and then it kind of steps down if you look at it. So it starts from E to D to C to B. Okay, and then right around measure 31, you start getting this more rowdy material. I called it habanera rowdy material motive, and it kind of becomes more flashy. If you notice, like the grace notes from the beginning were perfect fifths. Now they're diminished fifths, and it's just busier. There's more layers. This is kind of the party scene. It reflects the multiculturalism and the Spanish Judeo-Arabic melodies all at the same time. And here it's like kind of more chromatic sequences. I kind of circled these. This is where it kind of gets the harmonies kind of thicken. I could kind of see these, upper voices as one thing, and then maybe second guitar playing these. So, but yeah, this is the rowdy material. And right here, you start to see planing where, on a guitar, it would just be like holding the same shape, moving up and down, although these chords kind of go between major and minor. So I guess it wouldn't be perfect planing, but yeah, things start to get really busy, really chaotic. The party is, starting to heat up. And then here at measure 42, this is kind of a return of that beginning habanero bass ostinato motive. We're still in D flat, right? And then all of a sudden, now we go down to B flat major. So this is a minor third away from D flat. And so this is kind of where the habanero 1 motive gets further developed. Things are in octaves. If you notice the left hand habanero bass ostinato, it has bigger leaps. More notes are filled in. This is kind of the climactic moment. I kind of think like these two, and then maybe this third measure right here, 44 and 45, and then 46, it starts to cool down. And you can think about B flat as kind of like this opposing key area, almost as like the 5 chord in a way. Since there's not really there's not that much modulation in this prelude, it's pretty static. It's more about the flowery melodies and, keeping that consistent ostinato going. So here is our B section. This is the development section. We're in B major now. We have the habanero bass ostinato motive. And then here, ironic, Debussy writes, there's a sarcastic kind of witty and sharp cleverness going on. Like he's kind of teasing or mocking, And so here we still have this kind of habanero from the beginning, the introduction. And then here we have these triplet deplet figures, and they're kind of moving down. And these are kind of planing major seventh chords with sharp fives. So it's kind of like he's superimposing like one thing, one motive, then another motive, and then another one, and then another one. So it's kind of getting things mixed up. And then here at 53, we kind of have this movement from G flat, major 7 chord with a sharp 5 to an A7 chord. And even though the lettering we're not a third apart, if we look at the keyboard, G flat to A is a minor third apart. And then we go back to G flat to C. C is another minor third apart from A. So kind of this minor third median kind of progression. Okay, and then here 55, we have this habanero bass ostinato motive, more tritones. There are augmented fifths as well here, but you'll see like how it kind of superimposes like one motive with another. It's almost like this constant switching back and forth, kind of like this bipolar kind of quality to it. Right here at measure 59, we have these descending or planing parallel half diminished seventh chords. And we know Debussy was very influenced by Wagner. And, you know, this could have been like a paying respects to Wagner in a way, but, you know, not in the same way that Wagner did it. He more, you know, because he would just, Debussy is just planing them. They're not resolving. And then here at measure 60, you have your dominant sevenths that are also not resolving. And if we look at this is also another kind of mediant relationship, minor third apart. Right here, I kind of think this as a transition before we get into the recapitulation. So measure 62, I kind of labeled it as whole tone-ish. It kind of takes the listener out of the tonal center, but you have the melody and the bass, still bringing back that habanero melody, the triplet duplet figure. And then here you also have an A flat in the bass, which is, it is the dominant of D flat major, but it's not really acting like that because everything is kind of wobbly tonally right here. And then here at measure 66, we have the recapitulation of the habanero 1 motive, and now it's harmonized, it's thickened, there's another part that's added, and here you notice it's at pianissimo. We're kind of back to this double phrygian hexatonic 6-note scale. These are the same middle voice pedal points from the beginning. We're in D flat major now, back to the home key. We have this duet and dyads. And you notice these dyads are a little bit more crazy this time because it's like they went to the party, you know, there's this big party, and now they're incorporating that sensual seductive melody is now being incorporated with that rowdiness. So it's a little bit more on the fiery side. And then here at measure 75, you have this morphing or melting moment where it's kind of going down, descending, using the octatonic scale, and then resolving to D flat and F. And then here you have your guitar strum. You have your kind of whole tone on the right hand, and then this minor pentatonic in the left. And then you have the habanero bass ostinato with the first beat missing. Again, here at 83, this is an octave higher and it's slowing down. Lointain is far, so the party is over, the sound is dying off. Maybe this represents like on the harmonics, the string harmonics of the guitar, just because it's really high up. So you have these strums and you have that melody coming back, emerging from that sound. And then this was an interesting point where it's back in the rhythm of the habanero, but it's you're back to tempo. So there's a built-in rhythmic slowdown right here where the rhythm is in quarter notes. And then you have this loud strum, and it just rings out into silence. So yeah, that's pretty much the analysis. Debussy really imitates the Spanish guitar quite a bit, and I'm not super versed in guitar, but I know just from my own, listening to the piece from many different performers, he's trying to imitate a lot of like hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides, strums, string harmonics, and that slack key tuning. And it really kind of works. It's some recordings, it actually sounds like the strums sound like you're plucking the strings. And let's see, what else can I cover? Yeah, so the form of the prelude is A, B, A prime. So you have the A section and the B section, which is very chromatic, and then the A section where things basically start all over again. And it's it's kind of a very simple form. It doesn't modulate except for that one section. It goes to the mediant of B flat, and kind of the main motives that are used in this prelude are, we got the habanera bass, which is kind of the whole underpinning of the whole prelude, and then you have this habanera one motive, the sultry seductive melody, and then you have these middle voice pedals. And I wish I would have named each one of these maybe a little bit differently because they all kind of have the same kind of thing. They're all kind of derivative of the same thing. Here you have this more rowdy material where it gets busier and more chaotic and more fiery, and it's just more thickened. And kind of how he would use kind of mocking or humor, to kind of develop something, with augmented fifths, diminished fifths, and then kind of going almost like in a bipolar fashion, just like switching from one thing to another, like suddenly. And it kind of goes along with the piece, how the piece is very explosive and fiery, but there's also this passionate sweetness. And you'll notice that the piece isn't always one or the other. There is this kind of like hypnotic, kind of backdrop. And then that's where all the explosive stuff can happen. So, and we kind of talked about the scales that are used, and a lot of the octatonic and this double Phrygian hexatonic scale both sound very Arabic to me. They sound very just kind of Middle Eastern, and yeah. So that is pretty much my analysis of this piece, and some performance ideas. When you're learning this piece, it's good to kind of approach the piano as an orchestra. In this case, maybe approaching it as a guitar, and what are the different timbres and colors that you can get from this piece, to kind of create those different guitar techniques. So I definitely think that Debussy has the whole color, being able to kind of change the timbre of the piano, and he's very specific with his markings as well. So yeah, I would say with the different dynamics, he can go from pianissimo to fortissimo, and just kind of knowing where the drama starts to intensify, and not maybe going full out right away, but kind of working your way up to that. And yeah, it's like there's a lot of like points in the piece where it's very mellow, but then it's like it needs to have that contrast of where things are very intense versus where things are more kind of settled. And I think Debussy does a really good job of kind of creating these different levels of intensity, as well as like having these three levels that he's kind of working with. So and they're sonically kind of in different areas, like the bass ostinato, the pedal points are kind of in the middle, and the melodies higher up. So he's definitely using the piano as an orchestra in that sense. And, even though he wasn't known as a contrapuntalist or melodist, there is actually a lot of that in this piece. So yeah, if you have any questions, I guess you can comment below. But other than that, this is an amazing piece, and I definitely learned a lot by dissecting it myself. So thank you for watching.